My name's Rick, and I live in a quiet HOA neighborhood in North Carolina, or at least it used to be quiet. My son, Jake, had just come home after 4 grueling years serving in the U.S. Marines. He earned his dress blues after being promoted to sergeant, and those blues weren't just a uniform. They were a symbol of every drop of blood, sweat, and tears he shed overseas. Jake was visiting for 2 weeks, and we were so proud to welcome him home. We even put up a modest banner on the porch that read, "Welcome home, Sergeant Jake." Apparently, that was the beginning of our problems. Enter Karen, our overzealous HOA president, who acts like she runs a military of her own. She marched up to our door, red clipboard in hand, and barked, "Rick, decorations must be HOA approved. You got 24 hours to take down that banner or face a fine." I calmly explained, "My son just got back from deployment. He's a Marine. That banner's staying until he leaves." But Karen didn't like that answer. She glared at me like I'd just declared war on her front lawn. "Rules are rules," she snapped and strutted off. I thought it'd be the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. The next day, while I was out grabbing groceries and Jake was on base visiting a buddy, someone trespassed onto our property. They didn't just rip down the banner. They broke into our garage, found Jake's dress blues, his actual ceremonial Marine Corps uniform, and burned it in a trash barrel right behind our fence. Burned it like it was garbage. My neighbor Tom caught it all on his ring cam. The footage clearly showed Karen and her two-itty Doug, both in their HOA polos, dragging a trash can and lighter fluid across my yard like it was some kind of covert op. I felt sick. Those dress blues represented years of service. They were irreplaceable. When Jake returned home and found the ashes, I watched a man who'd faced combat fall to his knees in silence. I've never seen him look so broken. I contacted the HOA board. They said it was a misunderstanding and tried to claim we were storing flammable materials in violation of the guidelines. Are you kidding me? They lit the fire. So I filed a police report for arson and destruction of property. But get this, the local cops said it was a civil matter because of HOA agreements. Jake was done playing nice. He made a call to someone in his unit. I didn't know what he said exactly, but within 48 hours, 3 black SUVs pulled up in front of our home. Out stepped 2 uniformed Marines and a sharply dressed man in a DOD jacket. They didn't come to talk. They came with a mission. Apparently, the burning of official U.S. military dress uniforms, especially with video evidence, is a federal offense, especially when worn or stored by active duty personnel. It's considered destruction of government property. Karen had no idea that her petty power trip had just crossed the United States Department of Defense. While the Marines gathered the video evidence from Tom and the charred remains from my yard, Jake stood in the background, silent, seething. One of the officers said, "This isn't just about disrespect. This is sabotage of government-issued materials, and it won't be taken lightly." Karen thought she was dealing with just a couple of suburban pushovers. She was about to find out that you don't mess with a Marine's dress blues, especially not when the Marines themselves come knocking. Karen didn't know it yet, but the moment she torched my son's dress blues, she lit a fuse that was about to explode in her perfectly manicured HOA world. The Department of Defense wasn't playing games. Within a week, 2 federal investigators, yes, real ones, showed up at her door. I watched from across the street as Karen opened it with her usual smug expression, only for it to evaporate when one of the agents held up a badge. She stammered something about private property and neighborhood rules, but one of the agents calmly replied, "Ma'am, you are being investigated for the destruction of U.S. military property. You may want to speak with a lawyer before saying another word." Let's just say Karen's power-walking days came to a screeching halt. But it wasn't just the DOD coming for her. Word of what happened spread like wildfire. Jake's commanding officer submitted a formal complaint to the HOA's insurance company. Then, to make matters worse for Karen, Jake's story went viral. A friend posted the video footage online with the caption, "HOA president burns a U.S. Marine's dress blues while he's home on leave." Thousands of shares. Hundreds of thousands of views. Even some veterans organizations picked it up. Public outrage erupted overnight. Veterans began organizing peaceful protests outside the HOA office. They carried American flags, dressed in uniforms, and handed out pamphlets about veterans' rights. A few even marched in formation. The HOA board tried to call the cops to stop it, but many of the officers were veterans themselves. Tom, my neighbor, was loving every minute of it. "This is better than cable," he joked, handing me a cold one as we watched Karen peek out from her blinds like a scared possum. Meanwhile, Jake received a call from the commandant's office. Not only was he getting a brand new custom-made dress uniform, he was also being formally recognized in a ceremony back on base for valor and for how he handled himself under pressure. He invited me, and let me tell you, when that folded uniform was presented back into his hands, his eyes welled up.
But the final blow to Karen was poetic.
Apparently, the HOA had no policy protecting them from acts of individual board members that result in criminal charges. So when the insurance dropped them and legal fees began mounting, Karen was personally sued by the board members she once controlled. Doug, her loyal sidekick, flipped on her in a heartbeat to avoid being charged himself. He admitted under oath that Karen planned the burning out of spite and said she hoped it would teach that military brat a lesson. That little quote made it into the official record and into several veteran-run news blogs.
Karen lost everything. Her position, her reputation, and eventually her house.
Yep, she had to sell her beloved two-story colonial-style beauty to cover damages and legal costs. The best part? The buyer was a retired Marine colonel who'd seen the viral post and decided to retire into enemy territory. He put up an American flag 3 times bigger than mine and mounted a plaque on the porch that read, "Welcome home, Marines. Semper Fi." As for Jake, he's back on base now, serving proudly. But every time he visits, the new uniform of his hangs proudly in our living room, framed in glass. Untouchable. Protected. And every time I glance at it, I remember that even in a small suburban neighborhood filled with rules, regulations, and ridiculous Karens,
you don't mess with a Marine. And when you burn their uniform, they don't just get mad, they bring the core.